All right, dudes, welcome to day 17. What I wanted to do today is do a little bit of teaching on this whole sweeteners thing. I know there's been a lot of questions on this type of stuff. If you haven't asked, I'm sure you're wondering about them. So this week, we've added some things, of course, to all the plant-based foods that are not high in carbohydrate. So the vegetables. And then we've also added these sweeteners because we wanted this last week before we start adding back in sweet fruits where the carbohydrate intake is going to go up. We wanted to basically learn, have some training this week in how to do a low carb diet or a ketogenic diet properly. And you can do a ketogenic diet properly, a low carb diet properly. Most of us don't want to be ketogenic. Low carb diet properly with having these sweeteners in them. But you should have somewhat of an understanding of these sweeteners. So I wanted to go through, there's actually two things that are can be a concern with eating a lot of things that are sweet. The first one being is the main thing we've been talking about is what does it do to your blood sugar? What does it do to then your insulin levels, right? When you spike blood sugar, when your blood sugar goes up, your insulin's going to go up. It's going to grab hold of that blood sugar and it's going to put that sugar into your cells, hopefully, right? But if you've been eating a standard American diet, taking in a lot of energy, specifically carbohydrate, specifically processed sugars, then that's been happening too much. And now cells in your body could have too much energy already stored in them, and they become resistant to the insulin trying to put more sugar in them. And then the insulin has to go find other places. It can put it in your visceral fat, which is problematic for chronic diseases, or it could just go back into your blood sugar, and that's what ends up with diabetes. So we don't want any of that. So we want to be wise and right, not taking in a lot of carbohydrate intake, but we also don't want to have to get rid of the sweet taste if we don't have to. And that's where a lot of these sweeteners and stuff come in. But like I said, that first thing is the blood sugar insulin response. So we're going to look at that. But then the second thing I'll explain when we get to down here talking about something called fructose. So I would say the best, Jarek's already mentioned this, kind of the best two sweeteners that you can do, and these would be real food sweeteners, right? They come from actual real food, and through, I would say, creation mandate, cultural mandate, right? We figured out that these particular things can give us a sweet taste, right? When it hits our taste buds, we recognize it as sweet, so it's enjoyable, but it doesn't have any sort of carbohydrate in them that's going to do anything to your blood sugar levels and therefore insulin levels, but then it also isn't going to have a huge impact on your liver. And those two are stevia, which comes from a plant, and monk fruit, which also comes from a plant, but that's actually a fruit. So those are the two things that I would say if you're going to take anything in that has sweetener in it, look for monk fruit, look for stevia. So we're thinking protein powders, right? We're thinking you probably can start adding in some chocolate, more chocolate bars with this. You can add in teas that are sweetened with this. But then these are also things that you can use on your own to sweeten things, right? You can sweeten, if you're like me, would prefer not just the bitter taste of coffee. You can sweeten up your coffee with this type of thing. You can sweeten yogurt, right? You can use anything that you're going to be, if you have a protein powder that doesn't have a sweetener in it, you can add this to the smoothie that you're doing. And then that's where these things would come in, right? So all the elements are sweetened with stevia leaf extract. So that's why we've been able to add these things. Some of this other stuff, this Fit Aid stuff, I've looked at it a couple times and I only see stevia in it. I could be missing because there's a ton of other stuff on here. But these look like they would be fine. The Fit Aids, some of them anyway. But yeah, so that's where a lot of that stuff would come in. So that's where you want to focus. And like Jarek talked about, we don't want to be idiots, right? We don't want to just be smashing a bunch of stevia, smashing a bunch of things with stevia in it. We want it, we can have it, but we still want to focus on eating real food most of the time, eating the food, eating the meats, eating the vegetables, eating the fatty fruits like we talked about. We don't want to try to now switch around our whole diet so that we can start taking in these sweet things. I would say kind of a next level to the sweetener kind of hierarchy would be something called sugar alcohols. So these are going to be similar in chemical structure to sugar. When I say sugar, I mean things like glucose, sucrose, fructose, those type of things that we'll talk about in a second here. These are sugar alcohols, but if you look here, they're going to have, so one of them has none, that's erythritol, probably the most popular that's used in drinks and stuff. And then there's things like xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol. You probably don't even come in contact with these most of the time, but if you look at ingredient lists, they might have them in there. So just know sugar alcohols typically have none to low. This one, maltitol, is moderate insulin level, so I would actually avoid this one. If you see something with maltitol in it, don't do that one. And then it also has minimal impact on the liver. So sugar alcohol is also going to be an okay thing, but just know erythritol is the best one. So you could probably put erythritol in this category up here of stevia, monk fruit, erythritol. Those are going to be fine to have. Next category here are actual artificial sweeteners. So these are things made in laboratories. Aspartame and sucralose. The other one is aspartame, potassium, that I just remembered. Didn't put it on here, but if you look here, aspartame actually doesn't have any sort of blood sugar insulin response. Sucralose has a very low one, and then they're both minimal on the liver, but these things are artificial. There's some controversy about them of being potentially neurotoxic or being GI toxic, so sucralose destroying gut bacteria, all that stuff. So because these are artificial, I would just avoid these two things, aspartame, sucralose. You can think that the blue, the yellow, and the pink packets, if you are people who do sweeten your coffee, all those things like Equal, NutraSweet, Splenda, all those things, cut them out. These are also in a lot of energy drinks. They're in, what's that popular one that people sell? Celsius, I think. Sometimes people miss that, it has sucralose in it. We're not doing alcohol right now, but a lot of the seltzers have sucralose in it. Want to be avoiding those things. These are not health foods. So that would be in the category of enjoy food, regardless of nutritional value from on occasion. That's when you would really want to take it in sucralose, not part of a healthy diet in high amounts. Next thing, now we get to the sugars, right? So glucose. Glucose is what's called a monosaccharide. So it's as far as it gets when you break it down. That's what gets into your body, raises up your blood glucose. That's what we test when we test glucose, fasting glucose. Cane sugar. This is going to be, so sucrose, a mixture of glucose and fructose, 50-50, right? 50% glucose, 50% fructose. Brown sugar, coconut sugar, maple syrup, all these things are a mixture of glucose and fructose, the two monosaccharides. And these things are going to have so glucose is very high insulin response. Cane sugar, brown sugar, coconut sugar, maple syrup is going to have a high insulin or blood sugar response. Honey has a moderate to high blood sugar response. So we're avoiding these things, right? We're not going to have any of this type of sugar. We're not going to even have maple syrup and honey, which I would say are real food sugars, real food sweeteners that we can eventually use, but not this week. Those are going to be next week when we add the sweet fruits because of how much they impact insulin. So we want to avoid those this week. And then if you look over here, they actually have a significant impact on the liver because they have fructose in them. And the reason I even mainly added this is because this one at the bottom here, this is agave nectar. If you look, agave nectar actually is in the category up here, right? It's low blood sugar insulin response. So then there's companies that promote, we have agave nectar, doesn't raise your blood sugar, doesn't raise your insulin levels. This is one of them. So FitAid, this immunity one, which is actually my favorite one, has agave nectar in it. So, and it shows, right, 7 grams of added sugar. So we're going to be avoiding that this week anyway. But sometimes they could say, we don't have a insulin response, so therefore we don't have to worry about it if we're trying to stay low carb, trying to stay insulin friendly. But it has a very high impact on the liver, meaning that agave nectar is pretty much all fructose. It has a ton of fructose. And one of the things of why we think something called high fructose corn syrup is bad is because it has higher fructose than the normal sugars would or even normal fruits would, right? When we take in fruits, we're getting fructose, we're getting glucose. High fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose, 45% glucose. So we think it's therefore bad. Now there's also genetic modification stuff that comes in there. But the main thing is how much fructose it has in it. Well, agave nectar is actually 70-80% fructose. So it's even higher than high fructose corn syrup. And what fructose does is fructose actually, when we eat a bunch of glucose, when we eat a bunch of sucrose that breaks down into glucose and fructose, our body knows how to shut that off, right? Eventually it'll say, okay, I have too much glucose. I have enough. I don't need any more. It'll tell us, we'll kind of feel satiated that we've taken in too much sugar. Well, fructose doesn't have that. Fructose, the body doesn't have this mechanism to really slow down fructose intake. So we can just take in a ton. That's why stuff that has high fructose corn syrup in it, like sodas, right? You can drink those huge big gulps, those 64-ounce big gulps, and not have any sort of issue at all. This is why you can drink a ton of apple juice or orange juice, and you wouldn't be able to eat that many apples or eat that many oranges because of the fructose content. And then once you've gotten rid of all the fiber that's in it, that makes also slows things down. This is why you can take in so much of that stuff. So agave nectar has the highest amount of that fructose, and it bypasses. So not only can we take a ton in, since we don't have that stop check, it will eventually take in so much that it can start to then turn into fatty liver disease. It can start to turn into adding sugars in the rest of your organs and what's called visceral fat. It takes it, because it doesn't have anywhere to store it in the form of glycogen, it'll store it as fat, which we don't want to do. So agave nectar, yes, we're good with the insulin response, but very poor when it comes to the liver response. It's going to make too much fructose, so we want to be avoiding this one as well. The last thing that I'll talk about is there is one kind of special one. It's called allulose, and there's a lot of new research out showing how beneficial allulose is. It actually is very similar to fructose, but it doesn't have the same impact. If you see, it's actually a minimal impact on your liver. And then what's interesting is they know that it potentially even decreases blood sugar after you eat it. So this is one that for sure you could start having. It's in this category of how it responds to your blood sugar, insulin, and how your liver responds to it. But it might even be more beneficial for people who need to decrease blood sugar. If they're already highly insulin resistant, they can start taking this stuff in. There was a research done by Dr. Ben Bickman where he looked at this allulose intake, and he took, this is just animals for now, but in rats, they took a group where they fed them the standard American diet. Then they had a group where they fed them standard American diet and an allulose drink. And the two groups both gained weight over time because they were eating standard American diet. But this group with the allulose gained half as much weight as the group that didn't take in the allulose drink. So it shows it's having less impact on your blood sugar and your insulin. So it's not causing so much fat to be stored. That's because insulin's not always turned on, because the allulose actually caused it to metabolize differently. So not recommending that, right? Not recommending standard American diet and then just taking a bunch of allulose. But if now we can clean up our diet and take in allulose, it's going to have even more beneficial response. So I know that was a lot, but that's what I do, right? Jarek's practical guy. I'm the teacher guy. We're going to throw this stuff at you. Hopefully, it stimulates your brain, start thinking about this stuff more, having a better understanding of why we're doing things. When you have a better understanding, keeps you motivated, keeps you on track better. But if there are any questions, let me know. Again, these things are open now, so enjoy them. A lot of these things are open. Enjoy them. We want to make sure that something doesn't have sugars in it, doesn't have, for sure, agave nectar in it for now. We're going to avoid those things. And then next week, when we start adding in a lot of these other things, where we can add in some more carbohydrate and start enjoying a lot of the things that were supposed to be on here for us to enjoy in the form of sweetness. So be looking forward to that. But for now, stick to this low carb way, master it, so that even when we start adding in fruits, we can go back to this low carb way if we need to at any time. All right, see you soon.